In 1997, the rock band Foo Fighters released their second album, The Color and the Shape. It was released on May 20th, several months after the late January, early February date the band had publicly anticipated. Such delays in release dates are very common in the music industry, and this particular case didn't appear to be anything unusual. No reason was given for the delay, but they almost never are, and no one questioned it. It is notable that while it is officially the band's second album, The Color and the Shape was in fact their first album as an actual band, as Dave Grohl had recorded their first album, Foo Fighters, by himself entirely 2 years later. The new album consisted of 13 tracks. According to some sources close to the band, there had been originally intended to be 14, but the 14th track was removed shortly before his eventual release. Such last-minute decisions are also very common in the music industry, and no reason was given nor sought for this. The album went on to be a success for the band, with several million copies sold, was well received by the critics, and it included several successful chart signals. At around the end of 2008, over 11 years after the release of the original album, and 1 year after the 10th anniversary of 2007 re-release that included 6 B-side tracks, minor rumors began to spread surrounding the whereabouts of the 14th track that had been cut from the original listing in 1997. Attentionally, many had assumed it was among the 6 B-sides included in the 2007 release. Word began to spread it was not. This had disappointed many of the band's hardcore fans, who were eager to be in possession of any and all Foo Fighters songs in existence. It was around this time that curiosity began to grow, and fans began asking the band members throughout letters and emails, at signings and press conference, Q&As, etc., about the 14th track. Every time it was put to them, they would brush off or divert the question. They claimed could not remember it or quickly change the subject. As more and more fans began asking, the more visibly agitated the band members would get. At one particular scene day in April 2008, it was reported that after several fans had asked Dave Grohl directly about the track, Grohl suddenly burst out of his chair and walked out of the singing area, visibly distressed, followed shortly by the other band members. Shortly after, it was leaked by someone claiming to have been worked with the band during the production of the album in 1997 that the deleted track, supposedly named Piano, had been written and recorded solely by Dave Grohl. In the space of a few hours, while the other band members and recording crew were drinking in a nearby bar in the final days before the album's intentional release, he intended to slip it as in the 14th track. Upon playing the song back to the other band members and recording crew, Pat Smear, the band's guitarist and backing vocalist, allegedly grew angry with Grohl for reasons no one in the meeting could decipher. Seconds later, he stormed out of the room. While the source cannot be confirmed, this at the reason for Smear's sudden and unexpected departure in 1997 from the Foo Fighters lineup until his return a decade later. He strongly suspects that this is the main factor. Grohl did not seem dismayed or affected by the Smear's outburst and insisted that the song be added to the album as the 14th track, which no one objected. The next day, while mixing and adding finishing touches, Smear returned, demanded to speak with Grohl. Through in privacy, everyone in the recording studio could hear the two having a very heated debate about the 14th track. Smear was heard multiple times roaring something out of how Grohl had blatantly stolen one of Kurt's most private songs. Now, Grohl knew how much that song meant to him, Kurt, to which Grohl repeatedly relayed his indifferences. After a few minutes, Smear barged out of the studio and didn't come back. Grohl, visibly agitated, remained at the studio for a bit before leaving to cool off. The next day, Grohl, visibly hungover, possibly still drunk, entered the studio and attempted to start mixing through the tracks. He was angry, disheveled looking, and was acting confused. Eventually, the other band members and studio executives ordered him to leave the studio until he was clean up and sober. After he disappeared for a few days after this, to the point where the others had to go look for him, eventually finding him in a dirty motel room, drunk and babbling something that he knew was quote-unquote keeping the 14th track, and how Kurt didn't scare him. After some harsh words from his band members, he told them that he would get some sleep and would be back at the studio the next morning with a clear head. He didn't return as he said, this time disappearing for nearly 2 weeks without a trace. The others continued with their works in the studio, though by now Pat Smear had quit the band and told them that he didn't care what they did to the album. 2 weeks later, the band members reported they had gotten storage phone calls from Grohl all on the same night. They each reported that he sounded terrified and incoherent, stopping in mid-sentence as if to yell at someone or something next to him. Not one of them could make out what he was trying to say, and eventually had to hang up on him. The next day, Grohl arrived unexpectedly at the studio. He looked pale and nervous. He was trembling and would not make direct eye contact with anyone, and he had strange bruises around his neck and forehead. He briefly apologized for his erratic behavior before telling the recording executives somewhat reluctantly that he wanted to delete the 14th track from the album and want to leave it at the 13th track. When asked if he wanted to keep the 14th track for the use as B-side for one of the singles or as part of the future unreleased collection, he sharply replied that he wanted his track destroyed permanently and that it was a huge mistake recording it in the first place. Unsure as to Grohl's urgent reasons for his decisions, the track was deleted, with Grohl taking it outside and burning it, all the while standing over and watching with a look of intensity. Afterwards, Grohl seemed to lighten up, eventually telling jokes and getting back to the business of finishing the album, for which the release date had to be put back. Grohl would not speak about where he was or what happened to him. The band, suspecting Pat Smear had met him with and had possibly assaulted Grohl, demanded to know what had happened between them over the 2 weeks Grohl went missing. Smear, as it turns out, had been in Europe the whole time. After telling Smear of Grohl's absence and behavior since he quit the band, Smear eventually told them that the song Grohl had recorded and wanted to use as the 14th track had originally been written by Kurt Cobain, with whom Grohl and Smear were former bandmates, who had been intended to use it as the main single for Nirvana's fourth and, as it would turn out, final album in Utero. Smear said it was one of the greatest songs Kurt Cobain had ever written, but Kurt himself wasn't sure if this song would fit the album. Grohl had advice against using the song, calling it crap, that it would definitely not fit the album. Smear suspected that Grohl, who had been considering leaving Nirvana to set up his own band, was looking for a way to deceive Kurt into thinking that it was a terrible song, so he could then leave and record and release the song with his own band. In the end, Kurt decided not to record the song band, instead pushing Heat Shaped Box as the new single to huge success. After Cobain's death and the demise of Nirvana, Grohl, still looking into forming his own band, in which he would be the lead member, convinced, smeared that he would not be out to sabotage Cobain and the Utero album, which had been a massive success without the deleted song. Smear agreed to join Grohl's newly formed band, Foo Fighters, after the release of their pre-line-up eponymous album. It is not known if the two discussed Cobain's deleted song before the fallout in 1997. To this day, Grohl will not speak about what happened to him over those 2 weeks that convinced him to change his mind regarding the 14th song, where he was, who, if anyone was with him, how he got the physical injuries across the neck are all a complete mystery to even his closest friend and family members. Neither he nor any members of the Foo Fighters will discuss the story of the 14th song. Although the source confirms that he saw Grohl destroy the track himself, making it impossible to it to still exist and have been included in the album, it has allegedly appeared that the 14th track of some CDs bought on the day of its release in 1997, with some people not involved in the song productions or privy to any information therein, apparently able to rehearse it lyric by lyric themselves, although he was the only one that heard this word of mouth and has not personally met anyone who can rehearse the song.